This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to get up to speed fast on the research and ideas that are really shifting things. And today, we're looking at something that feels genuinely pivotal for where AI is heading. I mean, you just look around. The pace is incredible, right?
It really is. From complex games to image recognition, language understanding, it's moving so fast.
Almost human level sometimes. But here's the twist, the paradox we want to unpack today. While the AI systems themselves are getting exponentially better, the actual research, the work to make them better, is still stuck, kind of limited by us, by human researchers.
We're the bottleneck.
Exactly. We're the bottleneck. So our mission in this deep dive is to get into a system called ASI-H, this thing. It's not just about making AI better in the usual way. It's trying to get AI to discover its own new designs, its own architectures, basically breaking that human bottleneck.
Yeah, precisely. And our main source here is this really fascinating academic paper. It details what feels like a major breakthrough. It's a deep look into how AI might start doing its own science, its own research,
Right.
leading to maybe, an AlphaGo moment, but for designing neural networks.
An AlphaGo moment. Okay, so for you listening, the goal here is to understand how this goes beyond just like faster computers. It's a whole paradigm shift potentially where AI starts driving its own discovery. What does that really mean for innovation down the line? Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with that core problem, the bottleneck you mentioned. AI capabilities shooting up, right, exponentially. But human brain power for research. Well, that's pretty linear. We only have so many hours, so many ideas.
Yeah, you can only read so much, run so many tests.
It feels like, I heard this analogy, like having a supercar stuck on a slow, twisty country road. The car's amazing, but the road itself limits the speed.
That's a great way to put it. The constraint isn't really compute power anymore. That's scalable. We can get more of that. The real limit is human research bandwidth. And that's why this idea, this vision of artificial superintelligence for AI research, or ASI-4AI, is gaining traction.
ASI-4, yeah.
The idea is AI systems that can autonomously conduct scientific research, designing the next generation of models themselves. And the paper argues pretty convincingly, I think, that figuring out neural architectures, the actual blueprint of an AI, how its layers connect and work, that's the toughest but also the most impactful place to start.
Okay, so if we humans are the slow road, how can AI actually speed up its own journey? How does it accelerate its own progress instead of just waiting for us?
Well, that's exactly where ASI-RCH comes in. It offers a pretty radical answer.
How so? How is it different from what came before? Like, we had neural architecture search, NAS, for a bit, right?
We have, yeah. But traditional NAS is usually limited. It explores options within a space that humans have already defined. It's kind of like you give it 20 ice cream flavors we invented, and it finds the best one or maybe the best combination.
Okay, optimizing within known boundaries.
Exactly. ASI-RCH aims to go way beyond that. It's framed as a shift from, say, automated optimization to actual automated innovation.
Ah, okay, this is where it gets really interesting then. It's not just picking the best from a list. It's inventing totally new things for the list, things we didn't even think of.
That's the core idea. It tries to autonomously come up with new architectural concepts, and then crucially, it doesn't just stop at the idea. It implements them as actual code, trains the resulting models, and then tests them properly, empirically validates their performance.
Wow, okay. And it uses large language models, LLMs, to do this.
Yes, it leverages the sort of advanced reasoning and, importantly, the coding abilities of modern LLMs to make this whole cycle possible.
Okay, so walk us through this autonomous lab. How does it actually work? The paper mentions a closed-loop framework, 3 modules.
That's right. Think of it as a continuous cycle, an evolutionary loop with 3 main parts working together. First, you have the researcher module. This is like the creative engine. Its job is to propose novel architectures.
Okay, the idea generator.
Yeah, but it doesn't just pluck ideas from nowhere. It actually learns from what worked before. It looks at a pool of the current top 50 best performing architectures it's found so far.
Right, building on success.
Exactly. It does this clever thing. It samples in two ways. It picks one parent from the absolute top 10 performer, so it gets a strong foundation. But then it also picks 4 reference architectures from the next group, ranks 11 to 50, to get diverse examples, different ideas.
Ah, so it's balancing exploiting the best with exploring other good ideas. Keeps it from getting stuck.
Precisely. It's designed to avoid just finding a small improvement on the current best, a local optimum, and instead push towards genuinely new areas.
And how does it keep track of all this history without just repeating itself?
Good question. It uses dynamic summarization. For each cycle, it summarizes the relevant history, so the LLM doesn't get the same old context over and over. This encourages more variety.
Makes sense.
And another key detail, a single agent, a single LLM instance, handles both the high-level design and the detailed code implementation.
Why is that important?
It helps avoid what they call information gaps or implementation drift, where the final code doesn't quite match the original design intent, keeps it coherent.
Okay.
Plus, there's a novelty and sanity check. It makes sure the proposed design isn't just a repeat of something old and that the code is, well, sane, like not ridiculously complex or slow. It avoids things with ON squared complexity and handles data masking correctly.
Got it. So the researcher dreams it up and codes it. Then what? Ideas need testing.
Right. So the proposed architecture, the code goes to the next module, the engineer module. This is the evaluator. It takes the code and runs it, trains the model in a real coding environment, and sees how it performs.
Okay, the test driver.
Yeah. But here's something really interesting. It has what they call a robust self-revision mechanism.
Self-revision, what does that mean?
It means if the training fails, if there's a bug in the code the researcher wrote, the engineer module doesn't just toss the design out. It actually analyzes the error messages, figures out what went wrong, and revises the code itself until it runs successfully.
Wow. Okay. That's a big deal. It debugs its own attempts.
Exactly. It's not just pass-fail. It learns from coding mistakes. Think of the efficiency gain there. Promising ideas aren't lost just because of a simple bug.
Huge. Saves wasting compute, saves discarding potentially good ideas.
Right. And it also has automated quality checks. If a design runs, but it's incredibly slow or inefficient, the engineer terminates it early. No point wasting resources on something technically functional, but practically useless.
Smart. Okay, so researcher designs, engineer tests, and debugs. What's the third module?
The third one is the analyst module. This is the synthesizer. Its job is to mine insights from all the experiments the engineer runs.
Making sense of the results. How?
It draws on 2 main knowledge sources. First, what they call cognition. This is knowledge distilled from about 100 key human-written research papers, specifically on linear attention, which is a more efficient way for models to process sequences.
That learns from human expertise.
Yes, it gets context on the problem, the algorithms, the history structured from human knowledge. The second source is analysis.
Analysis.
That's the system's own experimental history, all the results from the engineer module, including information about parent designs, sibling designs. It lets the system kind of do its own ablation studies.
Ablation studies. Like figuring out which specific part of a design made the difference.
Exactly. By comparing related designs, it can start to understand the impact of specific choices, much like a human researcher would.
Okay, researcher, engineer, analyst.
Yeah.
Constantly cycling. But how does the system actually decide which architectures are better to keep evolving? What's the fitness function?
It's quite sophisticated. It's not just about one metric like accuracy on a benchmark, because that can lead to reward hacking, gaming the score without real improvement.
Right.
So it uses a composite score. It combines quantitative metrics like the benchmark scores and the training loss, and it uses a sigmoid function on these, which helps amplify small gains, making even slight improvements more visible.
Okay, so the hard numbers.
But it also adds a qualitative assessment. They use another LLM acting as an expert judge.
Yeah. This judge looks at things like how innovative is the design? How complex is it? Is the implementation correct? Does it converge well during training? It provides a more holistic view, closer to human expert judgment.
That's really clever, combining the objective and the more subjective assessment. Now, this whole process sounds incredibly computationally expensive.
It definitely is, which is why they used a 2-stage strategy for efficiency. Exploration, then verification.
How did that work? First, a broad exploration phase. They use smaller models, 20 million parameters, trained on just 1 billion tokens of data. relatively small scale. This let them run lots of experiments quickly, 1,773 experiments in their case, using about 10,000 GPU hours just to identify the most promising candidates.
Okay, find the rough diamonds first.
Exactly. Then, the second stage, verification. They took the best candidates from stage 1 and scaled them up. Much bigger models, around 340 million parameters. They trained these rigorously, initially on 1 billion tokens, and then the very top performers got trained on a much larger dataset, 15 billion tokens. This stage involved fewer models, about 400, but still took significant compute, another 10,000 GPU hours.
Right, so quick and wide, then deep and narrow on the best bets. Makes sense. Okay, so after all of this, the autonomous design, the testing, the analysis, the scaling, what did ASI Arch actually find? This is the AlphaGo moment part, right?
It really seems to be. The headline result is pretty striking. ASI Arch has discovered 106 novel linear attention architectures that achieved state-of-the-art, or SOTA, performance.
Wow, 106 SOTA architectures. That's a lot.
It is. And it's not just the number. The AlphaGo moment comparison comes from how they performed. Just like AlphaGo's famous Move 37 showed strategies humans hadn't seen, these AI-discovered architectures demonstrated what the paper calls emergent design principles.
Emergent design principles, meaning?
Meaning new ways of putting components together, new structural ideas that systematically outperformed the human-designed baselines. They weren't just slightly better versions of human ideas. They were often structurally different, uncovering pathways humans hadn't explored.
Fundamentally different approaches, you mean? Not just better, but different.
Exactly. They illuminate these sort of previously unknown avenues for building these models.
Can you give some examples? What kind of models did it come up with, and how did they stack up?
Sure. The paper lists several with names like Pathgate Fusion Net, Content Sharp Router, Fusion Gated FurNet.
Yep.
You get the idea.
Catchy name.
Yeah. And these models consistently did better than strong human baselines like DeltaNet and Mamba 2 on a range of tasks, language modeling, but also common sense reasoning tests like ARC Challenge, BullQ, HeliSwag.
And better across different metrics, not just one score.
Right. Often showing improvements in things like the final training loss and the scores on held-out test data. It suggests a more fundamental improvement in the architecture itself.
This feels big. Like it could change the speed of science itself.
Well, that's one of the paper's main claims. They argue this work establishes the first empirical scaling law for scientific discovery itself.
A scaling law for discovery, what does that mean?
It means they showed that finding these architectural breakthroughs isn't just reliant on flashes of human insight anymore. It can actually be scaled with computation. It transforms research progress, at least in this domain, from being human-limited to being computation scalable. It offers a tangible path towards that ASI4 AI vision.
More computation leads to more discoveries.
That's the core message, yeah.
Okay, so when the AI is discovering these things, does it just end up making giant, complex models? Or is there some elegance to it, some discipline?
That's a really important question, and they looked into that. Initially, the system did explore models of various sizes, but interestingly, as it evolved, the distribution of model sizes didn't just keep growing. It stabilized, with most of the top models ending up in the 400 to 600 million parameter range.
So it didn't just default to bigger is better.
No, it showed what they called architectural discipline. The performance gains weren't solely from increasing complexity or size. It learned to find efficient, powerful designs within a reasonable size range.
That is reassuring. What about the building blocks it used? Did it invent crazy new components, or did it stick to more familiar parts? What was its design strategy like?
It actually showed a preference for established, proven components, things like gating mechanisms, certain types of convolutions.
Kind of like human engineers often do, right?
Yeah.
Innovating by combining existing, reliable technologies in new ways.
Exactly. And what's really telling is that the very top-performing SOTA models actually showed less exploration of brand new, unproven components compared to some of the other models it generated.
Less exploration than the best ones. That seems counterintuitive.
It suggests a convergence on what works, rather than just chasing novelty for novelty's sake. The system learned to identify and effectively combine components that delivered results. It developed a kind of design wisdom through the evolutionary process.
Okay, that's fascinating. So let's get to the real secret sauce then. The paper talks about 3 sources for its design ideas: cognition, from human papers, analysis from its own experiments, and pure originality from the LLM itself. Where did the real breakthroughs, the SOTA designs, come from?
Yeah, this is the aha moment, I think. And it raises a really important point. If you look at all the designs generated, most of the initial ideas, the components, came from cognition, the distilled human knowledge.
Okay, so it learns heavily from us initially.
Yes, but here's the critical finding. When you look specifically at the top performing SOTA architectures, the proportion of ideas originating from analysis from the system's own empirical self-discovery increases significantly.
That might.
It jumped from about 37.7% for the average generated model to 44.8% for the SOTA models.
Wow. So for the very best results, learning from its own experiments became much more important.
Exactly. It strongly suggests that for true breakthroughs, for pushing the boundary, the AI can't just keep reusing or remixing human knowledge. It needs to generate insights from its own cycle of exploration, experimentation, and synthesis. It has to learn from its own experience.
That makes so much sense. Like the difference between competence and true mastery in humans, right?
Yeah.
You learn the basics from books or teachers. You get competent by practicing.
Mm-hmm.
But real excellence, those breakthrough insights, often come when you deeply analyze your own results, your own successes and failures, and synthesize something new from that experience.
That's a great parallel. It highlights this emergent capability of the system, not just executing instructions, but learning and innovating based on its own generated data and analysis.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. To recap this deep dive, ASI-RCH represents a significant step. It's demonstrating AI doing autonomous research effectively.
Yeah, discovering genuinely novel state-of-the-art architectures.
And establishing this idea of a scaling law for discovery, making breakthroughs potentially scalable with compute power.
Transforming it from human-limited to computation scalable.
And crucially, showing that for the biggest leaps, the AI relies increasingly on analyzing its own experiments, its own self-discovery, not just human knowledge.
It's a powerful demonstration of AI learning to learn, in a way, a major stride towards self-accelerating AI.
Definitely shifts the paradigm. So the final thought to leave you with, as you think about all this, consider what it really implies for us, for human researchers. What happens when AI can not only solve the problems we set for it, but can also define its own research directions, accelerate its own path of discovery, learning not just from our knowledge, but profoundly from its own experience? How does that change the whole landscape of science and innovation? What's our role in a future where AI isn't just a tool for discovery, but an autonomous discoverer itself? Something to really mull over. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.